and shipping lug of a Captain White of Summers Island, whom purchased 80 Pequot families to serve as slaves on his estate. St. David's is an island that was isolated from the mainland. There was no means of escape. These people lived in isolation for many decades, centuries even. All of the inhabitants, no matter what their tribal affiliation, were called Mohawks. It was a dirty nickname for the St. David's Islanders given to them by uneducated Bermudians. After many generations of being called Mohawk, many became convinced that they were Mohawk, despite the fact that a man named Jacob Minor, who is an ancestor to most of the St. David's Islanders, told the Bermudian courts in the 1700s that he was a Pequot, and that he was captured while fishing in the Long Island Sound. Over the years and after settling into a pattern of a new lifestyle, many began to carve a life out of this island, and now home that they had inherited, many miles from their homeland. This is a documentary on the reconnection of the descendants of the Pequots that was sent to Bermuda and the current Pequots of today.
This area where we are now is called Dark Bottom. This property is owned by the Bermuda government now, but many, many years ago, this area, including all these houses that are here, was covered by cedar trees and other vegetation. Earlier I showed you a picture of it, and you can see at the bottom of the picture all these cedar trees. And what the elders did over 100 years ago or more, they cut a pathway into the center of these cedar trees and other vegetation, and then in the center they cut another opening area, and in that area, once it was cut out, it was still dark because the vegetation was so thick, thus the name Dark Bottom. And once they cut out the center part, the elders used to light a fire and dance and sing around this fire in a foreign language. The language has been lost over the years, but St. David's Island still use few words here and there that are different from the rest of the island. Now, whenever we have a powwow here, our relatives from the States drop their bags and they come right here, and we say prayers and we give blessings to our ancestors who have passed on many years, those who have sacrificed their lives, what have you. And then once we have that ceremony, it may last an hour. Sometimes it gets very emotional, and then they go to their respective homes and relax, but it's not done until we get here. In later years, they use this area for picnic grounds or playgrounds for children and what have you, but we've asked government not to build on this and to keep it for us. So far, so good. There's a sign at the entrance where you see the sign Dark Bottom Playground. It's owned by the Bermuda government. But we treasure this. Every time we have a social, we plant a cedar tree in memory of the occasion as well as our ancestors.
Tell me about the Dark Bottom ceremony.
Well, it's every other year that we have the great reconnection that has been going on now for several years, that when our relatives from overseas visit us, whether it's from one tribe or several tribes, we all gather there to partake in acknowledging one's presence and also acknowledging those who have passed on, with the fire burning, which is something to which we hold dearly amongst ourselves.
And what's the significance of the Dark Bottom? Why that location specifically?
It is said by our elders that this is where they often gather during the summer, once they, well, let's say, finish their day's work. And this was somewhere to which I believe that the Europeans were not so much encouraged to be amongst the people. It's something that was chosen and observed over the period of centuries we've been here.
So that's even before the reconnection time.
Yes, but in a rather guarded way, not as publicly known as it is today. Of course, today it's publicly known thanks to the big reconnection that took place, and now we can share with them that even though it is taking place, it is something done. It's not done in secret. One is encouraged to observe and also partake, but no picture taking.
Most of them that remember the elders singing and dancing in this foreign language. But I know when St. David's Islands get together, certain words are said, and other people say, "What are they talking about?" Well, don't worry, we know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And particularly if they get excited, they start chopping words up and using different words. But St. David's Islands know what they're saying.
I understand we're at Fort St. Catholic Beach here, where
In the background here is Fort St. Catherine's Beach, as well as the old fort. Many years ago, like I said, 1609, the Sea Venture sunk, was shipwrecked out here, and the passengers, the 140 men and 10 women, came ashore here, and in essence started the colonization of Bermuda. Behind me is the stockades that were used by the colonists to whip slaves and humiliate them. In the background here, there's a replica of the Deliverance. This was it's to the inch. It's built on land with a concrete base. It's made of wood. And that was the ship that brought the first colonialists to Bermuda. Inside, it's not open to the public at the moment, but inside you have the slave quarters and all that sort of stuff. And the conditions, like I said earlier, are not the best, or were not the best. On the church property, just below the steps on the left there, for many, many years, there was a plaque, and it gave the history of this church and the date and when it was built, etc. And also included the fact that not only blacks were buried up here, but Native Americans from the Caribbean and South America were also buried here. Well, the new priest, in his wisdom or lack of it, decided to take the plaque down and refused to put it back up. And when questioned, he said, "This is my church, I do as I like." So we had no recourse. And now they put this here, sign here, but it doesn't indicate that directly that Native Americans were buried here, but Native Americans were buried here.
tell me about, what do you think that kept the St. David's Island people so close and connected? Because everybody knows everybody.
Right, because of that island, see, where they can get off that island until they hit the bridge built.
They built the bridge.
That bridge was built, I think, 1930. And that's why they kept together.
We used to swim. We bathed before the island.
Oh.
We went in blue tide. And then you go in like 10, 15 minutes. I come right back. Because I wasn't a good swimmer that day.
We have a young lady over here named Pearl Mines. Her people are Indians.
And they're from St. David's.
Yeah, from St. David's. They were Indians. The Indian descent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Huh?
How do you know they're Indian descent?
Well, we do, because we looked them up and all of that.
You looked them up and you knew.
Yeah.
And